and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right, folks, the Democratic primary is intensifying. Now, look, I know a lot of you are burnt out by electoral politics, and I have already said before, again, that I'm covering third parties, but I want to address this issue with the Democrats and how they've been covering the primaries, because now we're seeing people talk more openly about not supporting Joe Biden. Now, again, I've been showing some recent videos and polling data showing that Biden has somewhat of a strong, comfortable lead, but it's dwindling down. And there are more videos coming out that are highlighting Biden's age, his gaffes, his stumbles, his stutters, his failures. An argument can be made that Biden is not mentally or physically fit to run in the campaign trail of 2024. Now, again, the Democratic Party, as I've said before, and I have to keep saying this, has indicated that it is a private institution and they get to decide who they want as the nominee. They get to weigh in. We've seen firsthand how the Democratic Party plays its games in the 2016 and 2020 primaries, what they did to Bernie Sanders in 2016, what they did to him in 2020, but also what they did to Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang as well. And yes, to some extent, Marianne Williamson in the 2020 Democratic primary. The Democratic Party has its plan already set out. And you, the voter, don't really have a say. And already now recently, we're seeing firsthand what's going to happen to the delegation in Iowa and New Hampshire. The Democratic Party is threatening the Iowa and New Hampshire states that they will not be represented. Their delegation will not be acknowledged. Now, I wish all the best to RFK Jr. Let's face it, I think his campaign has more stability and more steam in its engine than Marianne Williamson. But again, anything can and will probably happen. But as it stands right now, a third of Democrats won't vote for Joe Biden in the primaries. And plus, there was an interesting conversation, and it kind of flew under my radar in regards to how Joe Rogan and Ice Cube view this Democratic primary, as well as RFK Jr.'s campaign. So first, let's talk about how a third of Democrats don't want to support Joe Biden, which I have to say, very good. May there be a contested convention in Chicago in 2024. And yes, Hardlands Media will be covering it. Let me go and close that. 1/3 of likely Democratic voters said that they would support another candidate other than President Joe Biden in a Democratic primary ahead of the 2024 election, according to a poll. And again, this article came out some time ago, yesterday on July 4th, but it's important that we highlight this because, again, this conversation has been intensifying. More people are comfortable saying it, which kind of leads down to the conclusion that there is the open possibility of Biden withdrawing his name. Now, again, anything can happen, but if that happens, that's unprecedented. But an argument can be made that he's not fit to run. An Echelon Insight survey of 472 likely Democratic voters revealed that 60% said that they would definitely or probably back Biden in a Democratic presidential primary if the vote took place today. A further 33% said they would opt to back a different Democratic candidate, with 7% saying that they were unsure. In the same poll, Biden receives more support when the names of two Democratic primary challengers, environmental activists Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and nephew of President John F. Kennedy and son of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and self-help author guru Marianne Williamson are included in a question about who voters would back in the Democratic presidential primary. With the challenges included, Biden receives support of 65% of likely voters, with Kennedy on 14% and Williamson on 4%. More than 1 in 10, 11%, said that they were still unsure on who they might back in a 2024 Democratic primary, with all three names given as an option. The Echelon Insights poll was conducted with 1,020 likely voters between June 26th and June 29th, with a margin of error of plus minus 3.9% percentage points. Again, numerous polls have stated that Democratic voters do not want 80-year-old Biden to run again in the 2024 election, citing concerns about his age and at times poor approval ratings. So let's face it, Kamala's approval ratings are far more lower. But also, there's another issue that needs to be brought up. Before I pull up this interview that Joe Rogan had with Ice Cube, states rejecting Biden's plan to shake up the Democratic primary calendar. And again, if you are especially part of the delegation in Iowa, New Hampshire, I would be extremely vocal and angry, if I were you, towards how the Democratic Party decided to change things up. Going on, President Biden's dramatic plan to reshape the Democratic primary has landed with a thud so far, as rejected in states across the country by both Republican and Democratic state leaders. The plan proposed in December aims to increase levels of diversity in the early primaries by making South Carolina the first primary state, giving a top billing over New Hampshire and Iowa, which is not a smart plan. Democrats in the preliminary state have rallied behind the plan, but bipartisan hesitation in Iowa and New Hampshire has complicated the possibility of the calendar applying to 2024. More than 20 New Hampshire Democratic leaders urged Biden this year to alter his plan, which they warned would hurt their party's performance in 2024 since they would be responsible for ending their state's status as the first primary state. New Hampshire Republican Governor Chris Sununu has vowed to spike any possible plan to move his state's primary. Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, that's a long name, acted in May to set the state's primary for March 12th, a clear rebuttal to Biden's calls to move the state's primary up to February. Iowa's lawmakers have also attempted to undermine the president's plan to delay their caucus. Democrats in the state proposed a compromise that would let the state hold its caucus first as usual, but then delay announcing vote results until May, but there is no final decision. The Biden campaign referred Fox News Digital to the Democratic National Committee, which did not respond to a request for comment. Of course, the DNC will never comment. Jim Roosevelt, co-chairman of DNC's Rules and Bylaws Committee, told the Associated Press that he was not surprised that Biden's plans received some opposition within the party, but is not worried because there is still time to make reforms. No, there isn't. And if you were part of the delegation in Iowa or New Hampshire, fight to maintain that. Now, again, I know a lot of us are burnt out by electoral politics, but the thing is, there's a very possible chance that RFK Jr. can win both those primary states because he's the only challenger who seems to be really shaking up and putting fear in the Biden-Harris administration. But if he should win that, the Democratic Party could and very well dismiss those results and dismiss the delegation. Now, I want to pull up this video here because it does call into question, really, why this administration lacks any courage whatsoever, and what RFK Jr.'s campaign can overall mean to the Democratic Party and how it could cause a huge implosion, especially when the Chicago convention takes place in 2024. So let's pull up this video here.
Get a good president in there, turn it around.
Yeah.
You don't think
I don't put a lot on the president.
Not
I
this
don't put
one.
a lot on the president.
Well,
for sure.
I wonder what would happen if Robert Kennedy Jr. got in there. Very interested to see what happens with that guy.
Yeah, he's he seemed like a guy who at least is down to deep dive.
Yeah.
And talk real and really try to dissect what's really going on instead of just going with the herd, which would be easy for him to do, like go with the herd. By him going this route, it's like he's on a more noble route, and we just check him out and see how he navigates some of this stuff.
He's definitely on a more noble route, and it's definitely not something he planned to do initially. I mean, he was an environmental attorney. Yeah. He was the guy that cleaned up the Hudson River.
I spent my career working for a blue-collar coalition of commercial and recreational fishermen. And over the next couple of decades, we brought over 500 successful legal actions against Hudson River polluters.
They would go after these corporations that were dumping toxic waste, and that was his thing. It was like mercury in the water, and trying to hold the corporations accountable. And then these women started showing up every time he would give these speeches, and they said, "We want you to look into mercury in vaccines."
Yeah.
And so this is 18 years ago. And so
now, you think corporate media will address that? No, they're going to keep on smearing him, talking trash about him. And we'll see what happens. But again, it's interesting to see another perspective. And again, if you are a voter in the Democratic primary, you have to be vocal. Now, again, the reason why Heartland's media will be talking about the Democratic primary is because, first of all, I'm burnt out by the Democratic Party. I'm not going to support them, but I'll be more than happy to tell those who want to cause change within the Democratic Party, or dare I say it, see its implosion, to give you some heads up, especially as how this DNC is a private institution. If you really want to shake things up and expose the Democratic Party for what it is, you have to be willing to fight to the very end. It may not be a victory for your said candidate, but you got to show the world that the DNC is not transparent. Now, Bernie Sanders didn't have the courage to do it. I hope that RFK Jr. does, because if that's the case, what a sight it would be here in Chicago in 2024.
18 years, this guy's been saying all this stuff about environmental concerns. And that was what his whole thing was. And then it wasn't until COVID came along. And then he wrote that book, The Real Anthony Fauci, detailing, what it is that these people are actually doing and how they are engineering these viruses. And they give grants, and it's dangerous gain of function research. And then they give you one medication that you have to take, and everybody gets on board with it. And they're making billions of dollars.
Yes.
And no one's talking about what he's saying. And he's saying it in a well-informed way, and he's expressing it to people like this is the playbook they always use, and they just used it on everybody.
Look, he's dealing with the same people we probably all are dealing with. And it's really time for us to really come up with a plan on how we're going to deal with this, because it's just going to continue to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not cool.
No, it's not. And I'm hoping people wake up enough to at least slow it down.
Exactly. And I want to see that happen. And again, I know that we did a recent coverage of Ice Cube saying that he wants to give a middle finger to those who are the gatekeepers, to which we here at Hardlands Media are more than happy to invite him to be on our show as well to share his perspective and thoughts. But I want to bring up this other article here too. Now, this is just a few days old, but again, we're seeing more of a conversation taking place, especially here on Politico. Why Democrats should primary Biden, to which again, I have to pull up this video from Case Study QB as it's broken down by people at Fox News. I know it's Fox News, but let's hear their perspective. And a huge shout out to Case Study QB, who's wrongly being censored on Twitter. Please be sure to follow his work. Let's talk about it.
So President Biden's racking up gas since announcing his re-election campaign.
God save the Queen, man. Ban on transgender Americans.
Has Vladimir Putin been weakened by recent events?
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq.
Don't go anywhere. It's a very sunny day around here.
Look, again, on a personal note, it's very difficult for me to watch people like Dianne Feinstein or Biden or any of these old politicians in office, because I have to wonder, does anybody in their family really, truly love them? Because I have to come down to the conclusion that all these families in Washington, D.C. are nothing but opportunistic parasites. Because I've known people who suffer from Alzheimer's and dementia. And it's a very difficult thing to watch and look at. Continuing on.
He went somewhere. So the liberal media thinks maybe it's time for a tune-up. A new Politico piece arguing why Democrats should primary Biden. Quote, President Joe Biden needs a primary opponent who can prepare him for the 2024 general election. Somebody who can make him prove that he can still run the traps and beat whichever Republican he faces. Biden already has Democrat challengers like RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson, but they've got some other names in mind, like Gavin Newsom, Beto O'Rourke, and Elizabeth Warren. As the piece puts it, quote, just as any heavyweight.
Now, look, I want to bring up those names again. Let's have democracy in the chat. You see these three idiots? I mean, these three politicians. What's the difference between an idiot and a politician? Let's have democracy in the chat. You got Gavin Newsom, Beto My Stork, and Elizabeth Warren. A type one, if you're like, yeah, Kit, these are some politicians that know how to reach out to us. They got our support. 10 out of 10. Life-changing choice. Type 2, I don't trust any of these three stooges. They're like the Hydra. Cut one head off. Another one replaces it. All three of them are jagoffs. I wonder how the audience will vote.
He puts it, quote, just as any heavyweight under the age of 75 with the pugilistic skills to put the current champion through a hammering 12 rounds. Tom, I know you're a big boxing fan. You know, you're big on that.
I'm a pugilist.
Tell me about this idea that maybe RFK Jr. isn't that person. Like, I don't understand that.
I mean, he is that person. They want to ignore him, though. They're pretending he's not a competitor. They're faking his numbers. I remember this last poll. They came out and he said he had 1.5% in New York. They fudged those numbers. He's got a lot of support out there, and he doesn't have just support on the left. He has a lot of freedom-loving people on the right who kind of like some of what he has to say as well. But I do think, I agree with this. the premise of the article, that it makes you stronger. I remember when I was a kid and Ted Kennedy ran against Jimmy Carter, and then Jimmy Carter defeated him, and then he becomes more powerful as a result. And then Ted Kennedy has to suck it up at the convention and say, I support the president. And so, you know, if you win and you win against a tough opponent, it's going to make you stronger. So in that way, I agree with that.
Yeah, but this is Joe Biden we're talking about, who's senile Fox News. I mean, come on. All right. The guy says, God save the queen. He stutters. He stammers. Let's have democracy in the chat again. Do you think if the Democratic Party, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, again, hypothetical scenario, moving all the safety for Biden. Let's say there were town halls and debates between Joe Biden, RFK Jr., and Marianne Williamson. Do you think type 3, if it would make Biden stronger and everyone would be voting blue and everyone's going to say that Biden's our guy, we got to stop Trump? A type 4 of like, no, it will expose Biden for how weak he is, and it'll cause further division in the Democratic Party and expose just why having a man of Biden's age in the White House is a bad idea. One of the worst ideas ever to even be implemented. Somebody of that age being president of the United States. Type 4 if you think that's your choice. So again, I wonder how the audience will vote. But continuing on, there's a little bit more to this. So I want to play this video here as well and share it with all of you.
Kellyanne, we talk about polls. One of the things that always doesn't sit well with me is the Democrats love to point out that President Trump was basically, you know, there was no primary, no debates for him going into 2020. But what they always seem to overlook, and I've got one poll here I can quote, it isn't quite a direct parallel, but President Trump never had under, I think, 94% approval rating from Republicans. President Biden struggles with that. 68% of registered voters have a major to moderate concern about Biden having the necessary mental and physical health to be president. So I don't think those are very easily compared.
That's even worse than an approval rating, because that is a direct indictment of his ability to do the job, to function mentally and physically. And that's a mainstream media poll that came from ABC last month. Joey, first of all, I don't think these are gaffes. I think this is Joe Biden. I think he mumbles, stumbles, and bumbles through the presidency. Everybody sees it.
Yeah.
And I think pieces like this, I would call them Operation Oust Kamala. I'd be very worried if I were her. Her approval ratings are at an all-time low. It is not racism and sexism. It is eyesight and hearing. We're paying attention to her. She inspires no confidence. She displays no competence. She doesn't seem to even want to do this job. She has shed over 23 or 25 senior staffers. Imagine that you're working for the...
That is actually very shocking. 20 to 23 staffers. That's unheard of. And again, Kamala was hyped up. I remember actually when she made her announcement. I think it was on Martin Luther King Day in 2019, I believe. Maybe that was the case. My brain ain't working as well as it used to be. But she started off with this huge bang and ended with a fizzle. Why? Because nobody likes Kamala. Simple as that. Nobody likes Kamala.
The first female vice president of color, and you don't want that job anymore. They basically all left, including if not especially the communications directors. But here's the problem with the whole premise. He's not going to get a primary competitor if he doesn't have primary debates. The head of the DNC, who's never really around, but he popped up to say, Jamie Harrison, to say there will be no debates. Competition in 2020 helped Joe Biden because he was way below in the pack. He didn't win Iowa, he didn't win New Hampshire. Competition would hurt him in 2024, but it's helping Trump. For all the talk about Trump is dead in the water after the midterms, he's not electable. The competition, the bigger the field, the more it helps Trump. The bigger the field, the more it hurts Biden.
Well,
now, again, this does once again call into question, furthermore, what this means for the Biden administration. I want to stop here because now we have to look forward. The Democratic Party has fears. And when you have so many people on social media, in the media, and even diehard Democratic voters questioning Biden, and yes, even Kamala, a shakeup needs to happen. It would be shocking. to see the Biden administration opt out. Now, I don't think they're going to do that. There's too much pride and ego amongst the vote blue, especially the most diehard of vote blue, no matter who people, to not have Biden run. Because after all, he's the person who beat Trump. But Biden isn't all there. He's declining. We are witnessing a man decline. He is not in his prime. And he has no business being in the executive office. He has no business dictating policy to the American people. We need somebody who is, first of all, not senile or showing signs of dementia. But also we need leaders who are active and well aware of the changing world. Now, of course, our two-party neoliberal system is blind and arrogant enough to think that we're just going to sit here and take it. But again, just to bring up that interview, that short interview segment of Joe Rogan and Ice Cube talking, people need to wake up. And in 2024, here in the city of Chicago, there will be a convention. You better believe that Hard Lens Media will be covering it.